Good morning.
Yeah.
she'll get us started. So thanks for your time and attention.
Thank you, Christina. All right. Hi, guys. How's everybody doing today? Good. Well, thank you so much, Gibbs Hill, for having us and welcoming us into your beautiful home. Thank you, UVI, for hosting us and helping to set up these events. We're so excited to be here and talk with you guys. Today, we're going to talk to you about some interesting opportunities with NASA, how you can eventually have a career there, different ways to get internships, and some exciting things happening. Has anyone here heard about Artemis? Yes, bonus points, bonus points. So Artemis is NASA's return to the moon. So we went to the moon during the Apollo program. Now we have the Artemis program. And Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo in Greek mythology. So through the Artemis program, we're going to put the first female and the first person of color on the moon very soon, because we actually just launched Artemis 1. Did anyone hear about that? Yes? Okay, I got something special for you. The more participation, the more prizes you get. That comes out of my team in exploration ground systems. I know I'm giving you a lot. Try to take it in. So exploration ground systems is called, we call it EGS. We use a lot of acronyms at NASA, hence our name is an acronym. Exploration ground systems is responsible for the build, launch, and recovery of NASA's Artemis mission. So just to give you a little quick image. So we have our SLS rocket right there. The big structure behind it is the ML. Our team builds that. They take all the pieces and integrate it together in the vehicle assembly building, or we call it the VAB. Our team launches it. I actually have some engineers here that were on console during and leading up to the launch. So we launch, and then once Orion goes out and around the moon, it splashes down in the Pacific Ocean. Our team goes out and works with the DoD and a naval ship, and they recover it and bring it back to shore. It's then trucked all the way back across the country. It's now safe at Kennedy Space Center, where our engineers are working on it, taking engineer in logistics engineering management, and he's going to talk through what just happened past 2 months.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, good morning, everybody. And good morning, everybody online. How you feeling this morning? Feeling good? All right, you're up, you're ready to go. So we're going to talk about November the 16th, historic launch. We're going back to the moon again, NASA, that's right. You ever heard of Apollos? The Apollo program back at, way back in the 1964, 70s, a little bit. Well, good, so you remember too? Yeah, so this is just a similar rocket, a similar mission, but this time, we're going to do a little bit more. We're going back to, get on the moon this time, stay on the moon, do some experiments to see how far and beyond we can go and practice on the moon, and hopefully go to Mars from there as well. So let's take a look at our video.
Our return to the moon will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface and
The
learn
space
how
launch
to
system
live.
is now counting down to liftoff of Orion and its maiden voyage to the moon.
It's the Orion on top.
And here we go. Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiate.
Huge crowd.
7, 6, 5, 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
We are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis.
This view of Earth from a human-rated spacecraft not seen since 1972 during the final Apollo missions.
Distant retrograde orbit. We're going to be about 38,000 miles away from the lunar surface. We're going beyond anywhere we ever went for Apollo.
The Orion spacecraft is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit.
Boy,
Flash shot. Orion back on Earth.
there. So now in 2023, we're going to have the Artemis. Artemis 2 is going to take place, or 2024, or around 2024, not 2023. And then we're going to have astronauts on the vehicle this time. And then we're not going to land on the moon, but we're going to do the same trajectory that we did with the Artemis 1. We're going to go around the moon a couple of times, just to see the G-forces and things of that nature. Where can we land on the surface of the moon? And then we're going to come back. So we're testing our systems on the SLS vehicle for humans this time, like we did this time as well. But Artemis 2, we're going to have real people. So we look forward to that launch. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the people who really helped us out there. And before we can get there, we're going to talk about opportunities for each one of you to join the program for Artemis in the future. What about that? You guys, you think you want to do something like that? Anybody can join. So Dr. Garcia is going to talk a little bit more about that, about what area do you think you can fit into? Everybody has an opportunity to work with NASA. You don't have to be an engineer or a scientist all the time. You can also be in media. You can also be a doctor. You can also be a scientist of computer science, writing code, anything of that nature that you think you can fit in. NASA uses everybody to get our missions up. So it's very important. Dr. Garcia is going to go into it a little bit more. All right, I'd like to introduce him now, Dr. Garcia.
Oh, thank you. All right, everybody. Good morning. How's everybody doing? You excited to be here? I'm excited to be here because it's the first trip that I've ever had the opportunity and privilege to visit the Virgin Islands, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. You all are sitting over here looking at this beautiful landscape, and it's quite an honor for me. And so what I want to do this morning is talk a little bit about myself, but really focus on you because you are the future, right? And so you are on the cusp of making some really important decisions in your life. And so, middle school is a perfect time. It is, according to research, it is a prime time to be getting interested in certain career paths, focusing on your skill sets, sharpening, and developing those abilities that are going to set you for success in the future. So I want to talk about ways to get engaged with NASA. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised native South Texan in a place called the Rio Grande Valley, right along the U.S. and Mexico border. I was first generation college student, and I was inspired by my teachers to become an educator, right? So I became a teacher, a high school teacher. I taught for 7 years at 2 different high schools, one being my alma mater, Mercedes, Texas, home to Hector P. Garcia and Rolando Hinojosa Smith. So, those are some of the, I guess, notables of our community. And if you look those 2 gentlemen up, you'll see why they were important, not only in our region, but across the United States. And so I went to school at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. I earned my degree in teaching. Then I went to the same school, UTRGV. I earned a master's degree, and then I wanted to pursue something else, so another degree, so I got my PhD. Anybody thinking about maybe doing a doctorate in the future? Good. Okay. Just be prepared. It takes a long time and a lot of effort. So it's not easy, right? But it is doable and is achievable. And so never thought I would have the privilege and opportunity to do that, but I was very fortunate with the support of family, mentors, and many, many others. So, the camera here or the projector doesn't do it justice, but here's some of the things that I do. So I'm a program coordinator now, but my previous role was as an education specialist. So I got to do what I'm doing now is telling students, young students like yourself about what NASA has to offer. So in these images, which are kind of grainy and off color here, these are some of the experiences that I've had as an education specialist. So we went to Disney World, right? Which is really cool. We got to see, the engineering that goes behind. Anybody ever been to Disney World before? All right. The Haunted Mansion. Familiar with that one? Okay. So they took us behind the scenes. We got to see a little bit about how that works, the holograms and all those things. So it's pretty cool, right? And so there's a wide variety of opportunities for people that are creative, that are innovative, that want to do something different. So just keep an open mind to what's possible. And then of course we get to meet astronauts, which is really cool, right? So the gentleman in the middle is Frank Rubio. I believe he's in space right now, or he just recently came down. But he was that was there at the astronaut crew quarters and Kennedy Space Center. So right before our launch to space, the astronauts go into quarantine, something that we're all familiar with after the pandemic, right? It's not fun. So these astronauts have to quarantine for a number of days or maybe weeks prior to their launch to make sure they're healthy and they're strong enough and fit enough to endure spaceflight for 6 months. So, any future astronauts here? Well, thinking about it, being an astronaut, great, right? Awesome. Because let me tell you, you'll have the opportunity to go to space more than we ever did in our lifetime, older generations. So you might be building those rockets or you might be riding in those rockets, right? So keep that in mind, please, as you continue your journey. Next slide. Okay, so I have a couple of quizzes. Hopefully it works here. And then we are given some prizes. What is the furthest planet from the sun? Neptune is correct. Great job. Do you know how long it takes to orbit the Earth? A little bit more. So it's actually 165 years. So 165 years, imagine that one orbit, right? So it's a really, really far. And so NASA has spacecraft that has visited those outer planets. The Voyager spacecraft, they visited NASA, or they visited those planets in the late 1970s and 80s. And so our spacecraft is the only spacecraft that have ever visited those outer planets. So we take great pride. And those spacecraft that were built and constructed and launched in the late 70s are still operational more than 40 years, almost 50 years later, which is really cool, right? And so it takes about 24 hours for them to receive and send transmission signals. So it's beyond our solar system, what is called interstellar space. What planet is known as a red planet? Yes, ma'am. Mars, very good. Yes, thank you very much. Mars, what's special about Mars? Anybody know what makes it unique? The weather? Yes, weather is really important. That's why we're studying it. Anybody else? Yes. Are you sure? We can come back to you. Okay, we'll come back to you. Yes. Yes, it could be habitable, right? So one of the things that NASA is doing and why invest so much in exploring this planet is because they had similar pathways. Billions of years ago, the planets evolved and emerged very similar conditions, but Mars, for some reason, dried up, right? And so we have two rovers right now and a helicopter, Ingenuity, Perseverance, and Curiosity, and they're studying our red planet. And Perseverance is doing something really unique. Our Perseverance rover is collecting samples, putting in little tubes for a Mars sample return mission by 2030 or so. So one day we're going to have samples brought back from Mars. Isn't that really cool? to study. That's incredible. That's incredible. So that's what we're doing at NASA. Next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, we can run through it. So acronym, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And here we see the vision, right? So every agency, every person has a vision, right? Well, the question to you is, are you envisioning yourself? Anybody know more or less what they want to do in their life? Yes, can you share a little bit? You want to be a lawyer, okay? So you're already envisioning yourself, 15, 20 years down the road, right? What that's going to look like, okay? So it's important to start crafting a vision, right? And maybe, you can have other choices and other decisions, but it's useful. Why? Because it helps guide your path, right? You know exactly what classes to take, maybe right questions to ask. You start looking for programs at different universities. And I read here that this school has I think it has 100% college acceptance rate, right? So that's something to take pride in, right? So you are, on that path to do the same thing as many others did. And then hopefully my challenge to you is that you take that knowledge and then you share it with others, right? So others, I'm pretty sure they have spoken to you, have mentored you, have helped you along the way. So we do what we can for ourselves, but then we do others to lift others and uplift others, right? That's our goal. Because success, as my colleagues will share, is not an individual thing. It's a collective thing, right? It's a collective experience. So it takes teams. It takes many great minds like my colleagues here to put spacecraft into space and be successful, right? It takes thousands of people to do what they did, just a few months ago. And so next slide, please. So here, anybody seen this image? You've seen it before? What is it? Okay, but you're aware of it, right? It's one of the most iconic images that NASA has had, right? The Hubble Space Telescope. Yes. That's right. It's one of those beautiful images that the NASA telescopes have peered into the past billions of years, right? And so the James Webb Space Telescope, which is just has currently been launched not too long ago, is taking these stunning images clearer and more sharper, more defined than ever, right? And so we are living in the golden age of scientific exploration, really, right? Those observers and astronomers in the past, I mean, imagine if they were able to see the images that we're seeing now, they would just be blown away, right? And so, we are leaning on that. We are standing on the shoulders of giants. And so NASA for the past more than 60 years has been a leader in space exploration, but not only space exploration, but inspiration of people around the world, right? And so, next slide, please. You can go run through. And there's one more. Okay, so NASA, what do we know NASA for? Off the top of your head, just shout it. Space. Anything else? The moon, right? What else? ISS, very good. Something else? Astronauts exploring. First to go to space, right? So aeronautics, robotics, earth science. How many are in here? I've heard this school is really good about being, around climate and being an eco school. Are you passionate about the climate and taking care of our planet? Yeah. So is NASA. NASA has a fleet of different satellites that is collecting data 24/7, right? And for many years, those satellites have collected, to do the things that we did and we're doing. We need a team of engineers. We needed thinkers. We need professionals that can take us to places that we never dreamed of, right? And so here you see a selfie of these engineers at the Jet Propulsion Lab in Pasadena, California, where I also had a chance to work for a while. And they're in the clean room there, and they're taking a selfie with Perseverance right before it was launched to Mars, right? And Perseverance was launched, I think it was during COVID. And so we had a successful launch on land. So you can imagine that thing weighs about the size of a small SUV, weighs over 2,000 pounds. So you can imagine the payload, right? The power, the energy, the creativity it takes, the ingenuity it takes to launch a craft like that in Mars and land it safely. It's not an easy task, right? And so if you're up for the challenge of solving and creating solutions to difficult questions and problems, then the NASA is definitely an option and a possibility. Next slide, please. Okay, so many of us are passionate about STEM and we're familiar with that, right? So the question is, why STEM? STEM is a way to become thinkers, right? It helps you improve certain things. It helps you become aware of your surroundings, yourself, and find solutions to difficult questions and problems that make our world a better place, right? Next slide, please. Okay, yeah. So why is NASA doing STEM? Because we're in the business of exploring. We're in the business of really understanding how the universe works. And for many years, think about this. Think about this. You look up at the nighttime sky. What is the first thing you see in a dark sky? Stars. So since the beginning of time, humans have become they were practicing scientific observation, right? And so throughout the course of years, we've had many people that have added on to this body of knowledge to help us understand our universe. But you know what? After all those answers, think about this. We've had researchers for years and years documenting the galaxy, the solar system, the planets, you name it. But after all those years, we still have a lot of questions that we don't know the answers to. So that's where you come in. Who's going to help us answer those difficult questions? You are. And it's not easy, but you know what? As a team, it is possible, right? So that is my message to you today, right? It is, something that you take to heart, something that you need to feel passionate about, right? And it's more than just a job. It's a profession. It's a calling, right? My calling was to be an educator, and I love it. I love every second of what I do, right? So you got to embrace it. Embrace that challenge, embrace that opportunity, and maximize it, because you never know where it will take you. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Next slide. Next slide. 8 or 2? Okay. Okay, so NASA, if you're not familiar, NASA has this wonderful educational, programming for youth and educators, right? So this is the way we get you involved. So that's setting the context. This is where you come in. Okay, so let's go to the page. Okay, this is fine. So what I want you to do is I want you to visit this website when you have time. It's called stem.nasa.gov, and I want you to explore there. I want you to see all the resources that this page has to offer. You're going to learn about challenges. You're going to learn about, videos. You're going to see opportunities that you can be a part of. Even in middle school, we do have wonderful competitions and challenges that are available to you. How many artists in here are in the room? Artists who like to draw, paint, okay, visual graphic designers, that sort of thing. There's a job for you at NASA. We need artists. We need educators, other business professionals, you name it. Physicians. There's a whole slew of career professional opportunities for you at NASA. So maybe STEM is not your area, but maybe something else is. Don't count yourself out. There's still a chance for you, an opportunity and a job waiting for you at NASA. You can keep going. Okay, so here, you middle school students, this is for you. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So please take advantage of the resource. Everything that you see online is free. Nothing's going to cost you a penny because it's funded by taxpayers' dollar. So we want our students and our educators to be using these resources. Okay, so let's go. Continue. Continue. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so here are some examples, right? Next slide of different career opportunities. And I just want to point out astronaut trainer. Anybody like to swim? Love it, right? So, hey, we need divers. We need people that help train astronauts underwater because, you know, for astronauts to train, very good. Or astronauts to train underwater, or, you know, they must train about 10 hours or so for every hour in space. You have a question? Yes. Sorry? The sea? Okay, that's a good question. I know that there's underwater studies. Some of our biologists do a lot of underwater studies, and they also develop habitats underwater for you know, astronauts to train. So the NASA sometimes works with NOAA, which is another federal agency, and they partner up to do underwater studies. So NOAA is really, you know, the one that studies the ocean. So NASA partners sometimes, but you might want to look into NOAA if you're a career in oceanography, that sort of thing. You can do that.
UVI actually has a $2 million NASA EPSCoR grant specifically for marine science. So if you come over to UVI as an undergraduate, you can take part in that. And if you get a master's, apply to the master's program, you can do specific research under Dr. Marilyn Grant, who is in charge of NASA EPSCoR. We currently have that, and that is in collaboration with NOAA.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So there you go, right? You have a university right here that has a lot of opportunities. So I'm in closing, you can go ahead, maybe go to the next slide. Yeah, keep going, keep going. So you are the Artemis generation, right? That's the message. So you're going to be leading, you're going to be setting the tone and the example for others to follow. So in 30 years from now, the world's going to be radically different because you're going to have young professionals like yourself doing really, really big things. So with that, folks, thank you very much for your time, your attention. You've been a delight. If you have any questions, we'll be around here to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. So I think we have a couple minutes for questions. I know we didn't get to introduce all of our team over here, but can you give us we have some goodies to hand out as well. So maybe just like a 1-minute warning and we'll do the goodies before they have to leave. Yeah. All right. Does anybody have any questions? Yes. Is there what? Was there strange activities in space? Sure. Yes. Sorry, guys, I should let you introduce yourselves. So you guys met Ken. I'm going to let them really quickly introduce themselves so you can see what they do, and maybe that'll stem some questions as well, and then we'll get back to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jason McCall-Binns. I'm a ground integration engineer. I work for NASA. I'm work on the same program that Ashley works on, exploration ground systems. I supported the last launch. I was one of the console operators for the time frame right before we went into the super cool cryogenic loading of the core stage. So I've been at NASA, or I've been at the Kennedy Space Center for around 16 years. So a quick intro about me. My undergrad is in aerospace engineering. I loved it. It was a lot of good courses. It was very challenging. I always loved to, learn about physics, math, the sciences, and all that stuff. And it really kind of propelled me towards the career track that I'm on now. So if you have a big interest in some of those areas, it can definitely help you to get a job with NASA and stuff like that. So.
Hey, my name is Ken. Once again, a little bit about me that I didn't tell you before. You learned that I am a logistics engineer. And what is logistics? Well, we move things, supply chain and management. We kind of move things from one place to another, storage and things of that nature, getting parts and getting people to the right places. A little bit about my background. I went to a HBCU, that's a historical Black university in Alabama, which is in Huntsville, Alabama. I love math and I love CAD. I like to draw. That's computer aid drafting, on the computer and things of that nature. So I learned how to do that very well. So I designed parts on the space station. I worked on the space shuttle. I designed parts for different rockets and occur this rocket too as well. I have the opportunity now to work with my wife as well. She's a civil engineer. I'm a mechanical engineer. She's from St. Thomas. She's not here today. She's a little sick under the weather, but I'll let her know about you guys. And getting to your goals are like a Google map pin that you drop. There's a lot of pathways to get to it. So stay agile, look for different ways to get to your goals, and just, lean on your community, lean on your parents, look for different ways, look for opportunities, take any opportunity that you can to reach your goals.
Good morning. So I'm Rudolph King. I work at NASA Langley, and that's in Hampton, Virginia. So I guess of the group here, I represent more of the aeronautics side of the house, which is the first A in NASA. And I've been at NASA for a long time. So I'm a senior research engineer there. So my background, I'm a native of St. Thomas. I went through the public school system on St. Thomas, graduated from Eudora Ken High School, and I did my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering at Old Dominion University. Then I did my PhD in aeronautics and astronautics at MIT. So the type of work that I do now is primarily in hypersonics and basically studying some of the fundamental principles of fluid flow and the interaction with how they interact with the body. So not sure what else to say, but if you have any other questions.
All right. So now you know a little bit more about them. Let's go back to your question. Did we find any interesting things in space? We found all kinds of interesting information and data on Orion that we were collecting. So now the teams are going through and all kinds of different radiation. What would the astronauts experience? We had, like you saw in the video, it was a very quick video. That video summed up months of work and a 25-day mission in like 2 minutes. So lots and lots of information and data came back, and we're going to learn about it and then prepare for Artemis 2. Right here. Who? I have not met Elon Musk. Have any of you? So Elon Musk does launch, you have? So through NASA's Commercial Crew program, so we're talking about Artemis, but Commercial Crew launches our astronauts to the International Space Station. So Elon Musk launches off of pad 39A. We launched off of 39B. Those are both of NASA's pads at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It's like Elon Musk and SpaceX rent the pad from us. So they actually launch their astronauts and work in the same building that you were in for launch. They use one of our firing rooms through a NASA contract to launch their astronauts. So he does frequent, it's called the Launch Control Center. This guy works in there more than I do, but so that he does frequent for all of their launches at Kennedy Space Center. Any other questions? Yes. Yes, that is, there is a lot of plant research. Does anyone want to talk on veggie?
That's a great question. And right now at Kennedy Space Center, we have our plant biologists. There's some labs there. We have a lab at doing different studies. And so, yes, plants grow differently in space, obviously, because there are certain factors. So when you're in space, you have what? You have gravity and, all the elements, exactly, right? The sun rays and that sort of thing. So they grow under certain lights. I saw over here, you're doing hydroponics, aquaponics. So that's what they do in space. So right now at Kennedy Space Center, we have our plant scientists that are conducting these studies in the veggie lab. And then also we have students, high school, middle school students around the state or around the country that are helping us decide which plants and seeds will grow better in space. So they're doing research, right? And just recently, we grew the first chili pepper in space. Yeah. That's awesome, right? So, eventually the goal is to get into more complex foods like potatoes, right? Kind of like in The Martian. Anybody seen The Martian? And it's like, is that possible? Well, maybe. We're trying to figure that out, but it takes a lot of research to get there. But just know that there are students like yourself that are helping us decide which plant or which seed we should grow in space. Pretty cool, right? Next question. Soil samples, well, we have from the moon, you know, we have certain, I think in Johnson Space Center, they're the ones that archive and have all these facilities that store these pristine moon samples, lunar samples, because that's really, you know, astronauts. There were 6 missions to the moon, and they brought back, you know, these lunar samples. So that's what we're collecting. And then also we just OSIRIS-REx. It touched down. It's another mission to a certain crater. So it collected a sample and it's bringing back, and I think it's due within the, you know, a year and a half or so. So we're gonna collect the sample from an asteroid, which is really cool, right? So we're working on that. We're studying our home planet first. So if you want to go into geology, being a geologist, that's a really good career because, you know, we're gonna need folks to study these samples. So that's, you know, just a heads up. You want to be a scientist, geology would be a great career and a great fit. Another question? Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's been a lot of research over the years. You know, when you're in space, think about the first astronauts were only in space, you know, a couple hours. The first Alan Shepard in 1961, he went 15 minutes. It was a suborbital flight. And then after that, we have, you know, days in space, months in space. Now it's a 6-month mission in space. So they're conducting all these, you know, eye tests, bones. What we have learned over the years is that, you know, because of the lack of gravity, microgravity impacts your bones and your muscles. So our astronauts have to work out 2 hours every day to maintain their bone density and their strength, right? And so not too long ago, we had a twin study. Mark Helly, one of the astronauts, he went to space. He spent almost a year in space, and his brother was a twin too. So after he came back, they studied, you know, how they were genetically, they were different. So that was known as a twin study. So yes, there's a lot of research being done. And of course, that's another career, right? Being, you know, a physician is really important. So yes, we're learning more because one day we want to go to Mars. And that's the thing. The more we study the human body and the effects in space, the better we'll be prepared to send, you know, humans to a 2-year mission to Mars. Is there still time? Anybody want to take that? That is.
Well, for me, it's transportation. I think just recently, last week, NASA decided to make a nuclear vehicle. Have you ever seen Star Trek? So Star Trek, you know how they assemble their ships in space, right? So instead of on the ground, so they take each piece up. So NASA's thinking about doing something very similar to that, taking pieces of a vehicle up, putting it together, and making a nuclear vehicle to take you to beyond, you know, the moon into Mars and probably even further than that.
All right, great questions. And I think I missed a patch for someone that asked one of them. So if I owe you one, let me know. So we have some goodie bags for you guys. There are, you're gonna get them as you guys are leaving. You're gonna grab the bag and then you're gonna walk along. We have some more to stock you up with. Each one of these there's stickers, bookmarks, because you need to do a lot of reading, temporary tattoos, but on the backs of them, there's a little explanation so you can kind of figure out, try to put the pieces together. NASA does a ton of different things, so kind of help you put it all together. Inside the bags, there's a big punch out with 4 models that you can build. So you can kind of see these elements on these banners and build your own. And then there's also a comic book for you guys to read about the first woman who's going to land on the moon. Yes. Can you see rain from space? No. You can see the storms and hurricanes from space. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We're really excited to share with you.
T-minus 1 minute. T-minus 30 seconds. We are go for launch. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good morning. My name is Christina Chanes, and I'm with the University of the Virgin Islands. I'm a research specialist with the College of Science and Math. We would like to welcome everyone across the globe and the nation for our activities with the NASA Outreach Project. This is an 8-year project that the university has embarked upon in collaboration with NASA Kennedy Space Center. Before I defer to my colleagues, I would like to welcome you for our activities with the NASA. The first one that you'll see is from Croix Junior High School. These are 7th and 8th graders that wrote, developed, and designed this video that you'll see. It's for our national and international partners. It is a tourism-based video with scientific communication. So, Croix. No, that's Croix. And Gift Hill will be following this right after. Enjoy the video.
Hi, I'm Kemasha Stalif, an 8th grade student, and I'm your future astrophysicist.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Charles, an 8th grade student, and I'm your future physicist.
We are the UVI Water Ambassadors from Adelita Croix Junior High School.
Many know the USVI as a beautiful place in the Eastern Caribbean, but let's share a little bit about our history. The United States Virgin Islands, officially the Virgin Islands of the United States, are a group of Caribbean islands and an unincorporated and organized territory of the United States. The islands are geographically part of the Virgin Islands archipelago and are located in the Leeward Islands of the Lesser Antilles to the east of Puerto Rico and west of the British Virgin Islands. The U.S. Virgin Islands consists of the main islands of St. Croix, St. John, and St. Thomas, and 50 other surrounding minor islands and cays. The total land area of territory is 133.73 square miles. The territory's capital is Charlotte-Amalie on the island of St. Thomas, previously known as the Danish West Indies of the Kingdom of Denmark, Norway, from 1754 to 1814, and the Independent Kingdom of Denmark from 1814 to 1917. They were sold to the United States by Denmark for $2,500,000 in the 1917 Treaty of the Danish West Indies, and have since been an organized, unincorporated United States territory. The U.S. Virgin Islands are organized under the 1954 Revised Organic Act of the Virgin Islands and have since held 5 constitutional conventions. You can see the islands of St. Thomas and St. John. We are famous for our beautiful beaches, clear blue skies, and festivals that bring millions to our beautiful islands.
In the USVI, there's constant study and research of extreme weather and drought.
Details of a dire situation in the territory when it comes to the continuous agriculture is alerting both the farming community and the U.S. drought monitors have listed the territory as severe. And
Researchers at local and federal agencies such as the VA Department of Planning, Natural Resources, and Water and Power Authority, along with the VA Territorial Emergency (MDT) Agency by TEMA, and the U.S. Drought Monitors, along with our federal partners at USVI, USGS, Environmental Protection Agency, and National Weather Service, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, among others, who work day and night to research and study climate and the impacts of climate change so that we can protect our community. You may not know, but many in the USVI actually collect rainwater for home use, as many do not have piped-in city water, much as they do in other areas across the world. Researchers actually study data from the USVI to study climate, and no, you can't see it because we have had rain. But in January, February, and March, you can see harsh distress of vegetation, erosion, and compare these images to others taken over longer periods to determine what the impacts of droughts are in the USVI and the region. USDA and the Farm Service Agency work hard to aid farmers in the territory when severe droughts impacts the islands. Right now, we are facing drought conditions, and it appears, based on research here, the territory is heading into an earlier drought. The video of the ponds shows them filled, which is a blessing in our community, but these ponds have not been filled since 2015, and just as recent as December were nearly empty.
Remember, you can do your part to address climate change, conserve water, don't waste food, plan ahead for natural disasters, and learn about science and STEM from every inch of your community, including school, when visiting and going out in your community and become an ambassador to protect our community. To our fellow future scientists watching today from all across the globe, we hope you enjoyed the presentation presented to you by the students from across the USVI and the nation as we learn more from NASA scientists about how we as students can join the ranks for NASA as we begin our journey to the USVI and other universities and study STEM to make the world a better, safer place for all of us. We are the UVI Water Ambassadors. And now, on to the national presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Christina Chanas, and I'm a physicist at UVI. We want to welcome you. We're going to get started today with the annual NASA outreach event here at Gift Hill School on the beautiful island of St. John, coming to you live from the beautiful Virgin Islands. For those of you in the cold weather states, it's 85 and balmy, and the water is warm. Before we get started, we want to share some student presentations. First up, Gift Hill School and E for USA.
Our return to the moon will be different than the last time. Our return to the moon will be different than the last time. We plan to explore more of the lunar surface and
The
learn
space
how
launch
to
system
live.
is now counting down to liftoff of Orion on its maiden voyage to the moon. And here we go. Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiate. 7, 6, 5. 4-stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
We are all part of something incredibly special, the first launch of Artemis.
This view of Earth from a human-rated spacecraft not seen since 1972 during the final Apollo missions.
Distant retrograde orbit. We're going to be about 38,000 miles away from the lunar surface. We're going beyond anywhere we ever went for Apollo. The Orion spacecraft is barreling its way back home after circumnavigating the moon and beyond in an elliptical distant retrograde orbit. Splashdown. Orion, back on Earth.
So if you saw at the end, it says Crew 2 announcement coming up next. So that Artemis 2 announcement, that's what we're working towards the next few months that we'll be sharing on who the first astronauts on the Artemis program who are going to be for Artemis 2. So I know we kind of jumped into a lot of information we're throwing at you guys. We wanted to share a little bit about ourselves. We want to have some Q&A, so if you guys have any questions, wanted to share just different career paths and career opportunities that we have at NASA. So like I mentioned, I am from Titusville, Florida. It's a very small town outside of near Kennedy Space Center. That's where I grew up. I went to the University of Central Florida, which is in Orlando. It's close to Disney, if you've ever been there. I started in the business side. I started as an intern through the NASA Pathways program. That is a great way to get started in any type of career with NASA while you're in college. A lot of people will want to start to apply when they're finishing up their college degree, but we want you to come in and start getting experience while you're in college. You can come for a semester. Since I lived local, I went to school in the morning and then I came and worked part-time afternoon. So there's lots of different neat opportunities depending on what would work best for you. So I worked in contracts. That's in the business world, negotiating contracts, high dollar things like the umbilicals you see there. So I got to help work with the engineers, what their requirements were, and negotiate with commercial companies and bind the government for these high dollar contracts. From there, I moved into a different, more of a communications route, and that's where I work now. You can go ahead and go next slide. So a day in the life of my job, it's always different, and that's why I love it. So farther on the left is when we were first fully stacked in the VAB. You can see behind me is SLS, that was Artemis 1. I'm actually standing across the high bay to see it. If you want to go back one more forward. So we coordinated tours in my group. So we had thousands of employees come out and come see the vehicle. The next picture, the second one that's astronaut Victor Glover. We get to work with astronauts. He came and interacted with employees. We host them. So my job that whole day was to bring him around to interviews. He worked with some media, documentary crews. There's some documentaries that are going to come out on Artemis 1 if you thank you. Artemis 1 documentary. So if you see those in the future and you see his interviews, I was on the side helping out with my claim to fame. That's when we first rolled out last year in March 18th. We coordinated a big event then. I have 2 little boys and my husband, so we coordinate big events for employees. Thousands and thousands of guests come out for these launches. So if you're ever in the area, we have an awesome visitor complex. There's some awesome tours you can come out and see and get to see everything out at Kennedy Space Center. And that's when we arrived at the pad for the very first time. We were out there shooting some videos, getting some content for social media, videos for our management, those kinds of things, different video productions. All right, I'm gonna pass it to Mr. Fullwood.
Thank you, Ashley. All right, so my name is Ken Fullwood. Once again, I am from Alabama, and it's a little town, a little state, right, actually, next to Atlanta, just in case you don't know what that is. I went to a HBCU that is up in northern Alabama, Alabama A&M University. I have a degree in mechanical engineering, and when I was young, as you can see, one time, just like you guys, I love to take things apart and put them back together, so that got my interest in engineering and my pathway of becoming an engineer. Initially, I wanted to become an auto designer, but I went into space, so which is okay too. So when I went into space, as you can see, my wife is with me. My wife is a civil engineer. I met her in school as well. She actually is from St. Thomas. She's not here today because she's a little under the weather, but we both work for NASA. She works for Teledyne Brown, a contractor with NASA. I work for EGS, and she's a requirements writer. And I am she's a system engineer, and I'm a logistics engineer. So as being an engineer, I love to design. I design space station parts. I design shuttle parts for the space shuttle. I designed parts for rockets, and even for the Artemis 2 parts, the Artemis part, SLS vehicle, I designed the upper stage propulsion system for that vehicle as well. You see me down on the picture here on the bottom. That is the shuttle actually behind me. Anybody know what the space shuttle is? I know it's a little beyond. It's like the more and more you get younger you get, you forget about it. So the space shuttle at one time, the Artemis vehicle is replacing the space shuttle vehicle. So the space shuttle had wings, the Artemis don't have wings. But it was great working on that vehicle as well. And right now I'm doing logistics engineering, which is like supply chain. It's kind of crazy because when you get a degree in engineering, you think you're going to be doing mechanical engineering all the time. No, I've done several different engineering jobs: project management, safety engineering, OSHA. I've done, let's see what else, logistics engineering, system engineering and integration, writing requirements. I worked with the Air Force on different things for ROSA, different radars and things of that nature. So I've had an opportunity of a long career for about 25 years or so working in this industry. So I really like it and I really love it. That's about all about me. Any questions? Okay, I'll pass it on to my next counterpart then, Jason.
All right, good morning, everyone. So my name is Jason McCall-Binns. I'm a ground integration engineer, work with NASA, work with Exploration Ground Systems with Ashley and Ken. My background, well, my role as a GIE, ground integration engineer, is to help the various ground systems teams with the design and development process for all of the ground systems. So if you think about everything with the exception of the rocket, the mobile launch platform, the launch pad, the vehicle assembly building that Ashley was mentioning earlier, we design and develop all those ground systems that tie in with the vehicle and provide things like commodities, power, fuel, environmental control system, purge, all of those ground systems that help get the rocket processed and rolled out to the launch pad so we can have a successful launch. But where did it all begin? So I'll point you to embarrassing photo number 1, which is in the bottom left. So that's me on the far left there. So that, the whole thing behind that picture is just to show that I've always had some level of interest in space exploration from a very young age. So originally I'm from Jamaica, so we obviously don't have a space program there. So I was, kind of on my own, just, liking space, loving space shuttle launches. So at a young age, I used to visit my grandfather in Palm Bay, Florida. I used to watch the shuttle launches off the back of his patio all the time. So that kind of really inspired me to get into this field. So, going to school, went to Jamaica College. So if you can hear, I probably have a little bit of an accent. It's coming out since I've, been here on the islands. But yeah, I'm originally from Jamaica. So that picture in the top left is a picture of my high school called Jamaica College. And I always just kind of focus more on the sciences, physics, math, because I really love figuring out how the world really works. It, that really challenges me. I like to understand how the world works from that sense. And I decided to kind of focus on that, throughout my entire academic career. Also joined the track team at Jamaica College. I did some pole vaulting as well. That also opened my eyes to how physics, potential energy, kinetic energy really works with that sport. And I definitely have the scars to prove it. So I I learned a lot through that period of my time frame. So going from there, I decided to go ahead and pursue my degree in aerospace engineering. Short story there, I had to figure out a way to get to Kennedy Space Center or work at Kennedy Space Center. So I decided to go to a school that was, in my opinion, at the time closest to KSC. I decided to go to Florida Tech, and I just opened up their catalog and I said, let me figure out what course is gonna, what pathway would get me to KSC to work on the space shuttle program. Just thumbed through the catalog, and I landed on aerospace engineering. So I started there, decided to do aerospace. Was definitely a challenge, very difficult course, but I loved it. It really continued to open my eyes into the way the world works and how all of these systems work. So I went from there, got an internship with the Air Force. I don't know if you guys know, but there's two bases on the east side of Florida. One is the Kennedy Space Center, and then right beside it is Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, where they launch a lot of expendable rockets. So I started out there as a vehicle subsystem engineer working the Atlas V and the Delta IV program. So I did that internship for a year, and then I got the great opportunity to work with the United Space Alliance on the space shuttle program. So that was my dream. I got to work there, got pulled into their project management department, working a lot of their ground systems that continue to support space shuttle. And then from there, as you all should know, the space shuttle was eventually retired. So there was a cooling down period where we focused more on developing the facilities that was eventually support the next program. So I worked on that for a little while, and then I joined another contract, Jacobs Engineer, working as a systems engineer. So that's where we design and develop, as I mentioned before, all of these ground systems, but we focus a lot on requirements. I think someone mentioned earlier that they had to meet with their stakeholders, understand what they wanted from a system. So we do a lot of that work. We pull their stakeholder expectations, or what we call them, and we convert those to requirements. So everything you see, like on the launch pad, the lightning towers that Ken mentioned, everything that you see that supports this program started out as a requirement in some fashion. It was literally words on a piece of paper that got converted into specific design, verification, or detailed validation objectives, or some type of a specification, or some type of a drawing. So we support that effort to build essentially what you see here, which is a major portion of our EGS's objective, which is to build, launch, and recover. So from there, I worked with Jacobs for a few years, and then I joined NASA, the NASA family, thankfully, and I've been here for 3 years, working as a GIE, and I got to, you know, I got to do one of the things that I was really excited about, which is something I always saw on TV. I don't know if you guys see like the Launch Control Center and the firing room, where you see all these engineers sitting at these cool displays, and they're supporting terminal count, which is that 10-minute time frame for to launch a shuttle. I did get the chance and the esteemed opportunity to actually experience that. So I did work some console duties in the time frame right before we loaded cryogenic fuel onto the Artemis 1 SLS rocket. So that's kind of my background. So I mentioned before, my background was in aerospace engineering, but I did also go back to get my engineering management degree from FIT as well, just so I had more depth and breadth. But I think that's all I have. I think I'm going to hand it over to Dr. King.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. So my name is Rudolph King. So I actually grew up on St. Thomas, went K through 12 on St. Thomas. And so that's me as a little boy. I don't even think I was 4 or 5 then. And these are just some other pictures with me around. I worked at a gas station all through high school. And I actually went to Educator. That's where I graduated from high school. So in the lower left, it's where I'm sitting down in a drafting class with one of my friends. I'm the one in the back. So just as you said, you know, back then CAD didn't exist. And so, you know, that was important because it, you know, as you said, it's trying to, if you have some idea in your head and you want to express it to others, that's the way it's done. Typically, you basically show it graphically. And as Ken was saying, and as well as Jason, you know, a lot of us when we were younger, we like to take things apart. We take things apart, put them back together, and that's because you have a curiosity as to how things work. And so from a young age, I would, you know, take things apart on the car, put them back together. And so I kind of got into, you know, a lot of mechanical work. So that kind of was a spark for me, along with my interest in mathematics. So as I said, I went to Educator High School. That's me in the middle. And it wasn't until maybe my mid-senior year, I decided to study engineering. So you could see I graduated from Educator in '83, so I'm dating myself. And so I decided to study mechanical engineering. At the time, I really didn't know exactly what mechanical engineers did. But because I like doing mechanical work and I had an interest in science, and I know I really didn't necessarily want to be a mechanic, I decided to study mechanical engineering. And I had an older brother that used to fix a lot of television and electronic stuff. And he was 2 years ahead of me, and he was actually studying electrical engineering. So I basically followed in his footsteps. So then I went off to university. I went up to Norfolk, Virginia, and studied mechanical engineering at Old Dominion University. And that's just me with a couple of classmates on campus. So, you know, it was a new experience for me. You know, one good thing about it is that I had a brother there. So, you know, being far away from family, that was actually a good. Now, on the lower photo, you see a professor, but this was after college. But that professor was like my role model and mentor in undergrad. He was actually the only African-American professor, I believe, in the School of Engineering, but definitely in the mechanical engineering department. So he wanted me to stay at Old Dominion to go to grad school, and I told him I was interested in going somewhere else. So then he decided, he said, well, let's take a ride to NASA. At that time, I wasn't really paying attention to about working at NASA, but NASA was only about, there's a NASA center. I work at NASA Langley Research Center, which is in Hampton, Virginia. So we drove over to NASA. This was in my junior year, and I was actually hired on the spot. I was offered a job. And so I decided to take it. So, in my mind, one lesson learned is that when opportunities are given to you, don't close your mind to these opportunities. You don't have to accept it, but at least listen to what the person has to say and then make a decision based on that. So that's what I did. And from there, that's how I got my opportunity at NASA. So when I first got to NASA in 1988, January of 1988, at Langley, we did a lot of research, aeronautics research. And this is a hangar at Langley Research Center back in the 90s, and you could see how many research airplanes we have. So these look like, your typical commercial airplanes, but they were configured inside to do a lot of research type projects. We don't have as many airplanes now. Most of them are located at Armstrong, which is in California. So, how do airplanes fly? So the forces, they're just very basic. The forces on an airplane for level flight, you have a lift force, which is generated from the interaction of the air and the wing of the airplane. And that lift force has to be just enough to balance the weight. And then you have the thrust from the engine, and that thrust has to balance the drag. If you're driving in a car, you stick your hand out the window, you keep it like that, there's not a whole lot of force. But as you turn it like this, all of a sudden it pushes back, and that's because of the drag force. So the first tunnel I tested in at NASA was this Mach 3.5 supersonic wind tunnel. So I don't know how many of you know what a wind tunnel is. Okay, so a wind tunnel is something that if we want to build an aircraft or even like the space shuttle, Artemis, those are tested in a wind tunnel. So we tend to build scale models, smaller models. We put them in a wind tunnel and we make a lot of measurements in a wind tunnel. So we can, we have theoretical models. We can predict what forces are acting on the model. But in a wind tunnel, we can make measurements and then we know how well our models are predicting what's going on. We don't just build something and fly because we would crash. We would be killing people every day doing that. So we have to test those things out, and that's a wind tunnel. And this is a relatively small scale wind tunnels, but some of these wind tunnels get so big, the test section could be about the size of this room or even bigger. And then how many of you know what exactly supersonic means? Okay, good. So, if as I'm talking to you, it takes a certain time for my voice to get to your ears. So my voice travels at the speed of sound, and in this room it's about 760 miles an hour. So that's like if I stand here and I scream at a wall at a distance, you would then hear echo come back, and that's because your voice travels, hits the wall, and comes back to your ear. So that's echo, and that's the echo you hear. So when someone says you're traveling at Mach 1, it means you're traveling at the speed of sound. That's relative to the speed of sound. So Mach 3.5 means that the aircraft is traveling at 3.5 times the speed of sound. And that was one of my early mentors at NASA Langley. And that model below, I mean, the images they don't project that well, but that was one of the early models that I tested in my career. How many of you have seen Hidden Figures? Good, great. So two of the key characters in Hidden Figures are Katherine Johnson, she's on the left. These are the real hidden women, and Mary Jackson on the right. And they retired just a few years before I got to NASA Langley. So Hidden Figures was actually, it was based on where I actually work right now. And I knew both of these women because we were involved in an organization. We were all members of that organization. So we actually did a lot of outreach programs with them. And this is Katherine Johnson on the bench, where this was maybe 10 years ago. I'm like second from the right, where we honored her. She was about 95 at the time. So these are just some of the outreach program I was involved with at the time. So then after being at NASA for about 4 years, I decided to go back to grad school to work on my PhD. So I went to MIT, and these are, that was a nice experience. I mean, a challenging experience, but here's just some pictures with, me and some of my family with my mom. And then the picture on the right is, what we call a hood-in ceremony. So when you get a PhD or doctorate degree, it's like a special ceremony where, they hood you. It's a much smaller ceremony, and it's supposed to be a special occasion. So at NASA, we have these things we call experimental planes or X-planes. And these X-planes are planes that NASA would build to try to demonstrate something. So this is, if we're trying to figure out how to do something, we build these X-planes. And the one on the top is called X-57 or Maxwell. So this is a small scale electrified airplane. And one reason for doing this is to try to deal with, the emission problems we have. So that's a small scale electric plane. Now the one below is called X-59 or Quest, and that's a supersonic plane. And the aim of this one is to try to reduce the sonic boom. So you notice how it has a really long nose on it. And what the sonic boom is, if a plane is flying overhead and it's flying supersonically, when it passes, it makes a loud noise. And so regulators don't allow planes to fly supersonically here or in other countries overland. And so if you're in a, this is more or less like a hangar. If you're in a hangar like this and you have a supersonic plane flying above, when that plane is above us, you're not going to hear anything. When that plane just passes us, you're not going to hear anything. Because remember, the plane is flying faster than the speed of sound. And when that plane passes a certain distance, it's almost like a wave that comes back where everything comes together and you just hear boom. And this whole thing would like rattle when it passes. So as I said before, if we want to go from, say, these are all conceptual drawings, so the planes are not built yet. Now, let's say if we want to go to from this X-59, what we do, we build models. We have the mathematical models, and then we actually build wind tunnel models. So this is one wind tunnel model. So we have to check a lot of the aerodynamic database to make sure it's consistent with what we think we have. So this is where we go from wind tunnel testing, and then we actually build a prototype. So this is actually a prototype that was built by Lockheed, and this was actually right now, it was in Texas, and they were doing some structural testing on it to make sure that when this thing actually goes in the air, the wings don't fall off. So they do, with loading to make sure it can take the loading that we expect. So this is expected to fly in sometime in 2023. So these are just a couple activities I've been involved with over the years. This is a test, I was leading in what we call the National Transonic Facility. That's actually a cryogenic tunnel. And this can get what we call these real life conditions for transonic conditions. And on the right is actually a flight experiment I was involved in at Armstrong. And at the bottom, you just see on the bottom of the weapons bay, you kind of see a little wing section that's hanging out. And you can see the plane as it's ascending to go for one of the test flights. And this flight was done at Mach 2. So right now, I'm mainly doing high-speed research. High-speed meaning supersonic and hypersonic. So just to give you a background of some of these planes, I don't know how many of you have heard about the Concorde. Yeah, but the Concorde was retired in 2003 around then because it wasn't really economically viable. It was just too expensive. It would more or less leave from like, around the UK area. It would only be able to go supersonic over the Atlantic, and then it would have to slow down to once it gets overland in the US. So it was not economically viable. And then now this is SR-71 Blackbird. So this was a high altitude reconnaissance vehicle for the Department of Defense. And this flew at just over Mach 3. This was a program X-43 that happened about maybe 12, 15 years ago. And a lot of this work was done out of NASA Langley Research Center. So this is a B-52 bomber, a military jet. You could see a little a booster rocket under the right wing. And then once it got to a certain altitude, the booster rocket was released. So there's the booster rocket taken off. So it was released, and then the rocket was ignited. And then once that got to a certain speed, right on the tip of it, that black tip is the X-43, and that's the X-43, and then that was released. That flew at about Mach 9.6, so about Mach 10, and that was they sustained that flight for a while. That was a major demonstration because it was supposed to demonstrate something called a scramjet propulsion. And then over the years, just showing you basically a couple of the awards. But as I said, I worked mainly in the aero program. But after we had a disaster with the Columbia, and I think that was maybe like 2003, 2004-ish, I did some work to support it. And so I worked on the space side for a few years, and that's something called a return to flight activity to try to get us back to flight. And that was just one of the cases. So that's really all I wanted to talk about today, just to give you my experience of my path coming from the Virgin Islands and ended up and then up at NASA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So up next, we're gonna do a little Q&A in a minute. So start thinking about your questions. Remember I mentioned goodies. We have some Artemis mission patches for you guys if you can ask a question. So start thinking about them. If you're online, you can type your question in the chat and we'll get some responses to you as well. But up next, we want to hear from Dr. Samuel Garcia. He's going to talk about his job and some different opportunities for you guys to get started with now as high school students and as college students looking ahead for your careers.
All right. Thank you, Miss Ashley. I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Okay, so I'm going to ask everybody a favor. If you could just stand up for a second or two. We want to wake up everybody in attendance. I know we got a lot of great things coming up, but I was a former educator, so I know about a thing or two about keeping students awake. So just go ahead and stretch. Your bodies get a little stiff. Even we get stiff. If you get stiff, imagine us older folks, right? So we need to move. Move your legs a little bit, get the blood flowing again, get that brain pumping, blood flowing through the brain again. And so, we want to prime ourselves, right, for learning. So when you feel comfortable, you can sit back down, take a breather. And so what I want to do is just talk a little bit about myself. I have a different career path and trajectory like we always do, but I have a different area. My focus is education. So I was born and raised in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, deep South Texas. Anybody know Texas? Everybody been to Texas before? Yeah? Okay, good. It's the second largest state in the United States, behind Alaska. Very good. And so, Texas is Texas. It's a big state. It takes about 12 hours to drive from one end to the other end. So it's a really, really long drive, but that's home, right? And it's a special place. So if this is home to you, of course, it's going to be a special place. So I was born and raised. I am the firstborn of two siblings. And my parents were migrant farm workers. Migrant farm workers are people that would travel to the northern portions of the United States during the migrating season to pick crops in the field. So my parents and my grandparents did that for a living. So I was the first one from my family to go to college, right? So I had no experience in college. It was intimidating as a first-gen student. And so, I made a lot of mistakes, right? But it's okay. Making mistakes is how we learn, right? Sometimes. And so, I would dust myself up. After a bad test, I felt like I bombed it. And, I would have to study harder and find out ways or solutions to improve, right? So this was a time where a lot of programs didn't exist for students. You had to figure things out on your own. Sometimes it was intimidating talking to professors because they had all these experience and degrees and years and research and that, blah, 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 blah. And so, Yeah, it was intimidating to just approach these faculty members. So one thing I always tell students is that, you know, have a question, raise your hand, be confident, and ask questions, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So you don't want to be left out in the dark, in the cold, and figure things out on your own, right? So, you know, you take initiative by asking questions, right? And so I'm pretty sure your teachers are welcoming. You have great classrooms that are inviting, and, you know, you feel comfortable in sharing or asking questions, and that's what it's about, right? It's a space that we create. And so, you know, I went to college, I earned a degree in teaching. I became a teacher for 7 years at the high school level. My subject was geography, and that was my focus. So I love to study, you know, maps, cartography, GIS mapping, that sort of thing. So, you know, I was fascinated with that, and history. So I have a deep, deep love of history. And so I did that for 7 years. I went on to earn another degree, thinking I wanted to become an administrator, which is a principal. But then I was like, no, that's not for me. And so it takes a special person, of course, to be in those roles. But you know, during that time in school, what I really appreciated was the energy that the youth bring. Right? You give us a lot of you make us feel young as educators, right? You keep us on our toes. You're challenging at times, but we love you. We're in this to support you, and never think twice. The reasons, you know, educators are there to serve you. They are citizens. They're the pillar of the community, right? And we need strong, effective teachers, right? And so, you know, those were the models, role models that I had growing up. People that look like me, you know, were teachers. So they inspired me to do the same thing. So when I went back to my classroom, I try to, you know, do the best I can for my students. Man, I love every second of it. You know, one of the things that I really enjoyed was, you know, creating like this community group. It was called Voices of Mercedes. So what we did was we did a lot of research in the community. We went out, we went to different parts of the community, and we did all sorts of research, especially like historical research. Well, we really wanted to understand our history, where we came from. We wanted to document those stories. And so I wanted to teach my students that everybody has a voice, everybody has something special to share. And so what we discovered was that, you know, a lot of the things that we learned weren't taught in the books, in the history books, right? So that gave them a lot of confidence and, you know, to embrace their culture, embrace their identity, right? Because you don't know who you are. You need to first, you know, understand, like all these gentlemen up here, they're phenomenal, but, you know, the work begins internally. It's like the type of person you want to be, right? You want to be an engineer, a successful person, that's what you're going to chase, and you're going to work towards that, right? And so it begins with the self. So, you know, finding yourself, understanding yourself, and making sense of who you are is the number one thing, because you don't want to go traveling through life not knowing who you are, where your roots, you know, where you come from, right? So always embrace that and take that with you, because what I was reflecting on today is that, you know, nobody gets to the place and position alone. There's always somebody that have paved the way for you to be here today. And so we honor them. How do you honor them? By doing the best you can in school, by getting great, you know, good grades in school, by going to college and making, becoming a professional. And then you come back and give back to your community. So just the way I did becoming a teacher, I gave back to my community because I wanted to raise and nurture and inspire students. We want you to do the same thing, right? So you might be the first from anybody who might be the first person from your family to go to college, or you all have first, right? You're on the path, right? You're on the path to becoming these trailblazers. So you're becoming trailblazers. You just don't know it, right? So with you, you are, you're standing on the shoulders of so many people that have come before you, people who you don't know, and people that are within your family. So honor that, honor them, honor their sacrifices and their hard work and efforts by doing the best. Like these two young people, that was a great presentation, right? It takes a lot of confidence to share, to step up. And, they can attest that, when you're going into professions, you're going to have to talk in front of folks, right? So practice these skills in school. Have this confidence, walk around, strut, and, have confidence in yourself, right? Because you are somebody special. You have a lot of talents to offer, a lot of gifts to offer, right? So we see you, the teachers see your potential, they see your promise, And we want you to see the same thing when you look in the mirror. You are somebody that's headed somewhere, somebody that's going to be doing great things in the near future, somebody who's going to be inspiring the world and changing the world for better. And so eventually I made my way to NASA, right? I got a PhD in education and I love what I do. But now I do outreach. I talk to students about internships and pathways. I tell you, things about the challenges that you can participate in. So at the age of 16, anybody age of 16 yet here? At 16? At the age of 16, you can start applying for a NASA internship, right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to share these links. We're going to share this information with your teachers. So that way they can point you and orient you to the right direction, because we want you to start early. So imagine when you go to college, you have an internship from NASA on your resume. That looks great, right? So, think about it, keep an open mind. And that's been kind of like the message up here, is to keep an open mind. And so, whether you are, interested in arts, whether you're interested in music and dance and all these different things, you can do that and become an engineer. You can do that and become a scientist. You can do that and become, a lawyer, a doctor. You can do all those things, right? Mae Jemison, the first African-American woman in space, she was a dancer, she was a physician, and she was an astronaut. She did all those things. She's phenomenal, right? So she's just one example. And they're not just Mae Jemison, but there's a host of other role models out there, right? So if you can't find one, maybe somebody but there's other people that have helped pave the way, and they're doing great things. So, I encourage you to look at NASA. I encourage you to look at the internship website. If you need help, the adults here, the teachers here, educators, they're here to help you, and we're here to help you. We're just an email away, right? One of the few pieces of advice that I would give high school students when you are contemplating, a certain career path, is that, let's say, for example, you want to go to, I don't know, name me a college or university that you guys want to attend. Any? Shout it out. It's fine. It doesn't matter. Name a Ringling College, right? So example, so what program you might have? Do you know what program you might be interested in studying? Animation. Okay, so they have a school of animation, I assume, right? So one of the things that the beauty of living in today's 21st century, as you can search anything online, right? You know who the dean of the college is, who the chair and all those. Reach out to them. Ask for advice. Hey, I'm a student. I'm a prospective student. I want to get more information about this program. What do you recommend? Chances are they're going to respond, right? And so you have that, so those are some tips, right? So if you're interested, reach out. People are there to help you and support you, right? So if one door closes, you're just going to have to find another way to get there. And that's what it's about, overcoming these challenges like I have, like these gentlemen up here, like Miss Ashley has overcome certain challenges in her life and career. And so we want you to do the same thing, right? So there is plenty of opportunities for you at NASA, and I hope one day we get to work alongside you. Thank you.
Thank you. So you guys that are here with us in the room, we have some goodies for you at the very end, that there's a QR code to our site, intern.nasa.gov. So if you're online, make sure you go there, intern.nasa.gov, and then stem.nasa.gov. Those are two great sites. The intern site, there'll be opportunities to apply to internships, and the STEM site, tons of resources, teachers out there. There's tons of activities, lessons you can use. So take advantage of it. They're all free resources out there for you guys. So before we wrap up, I think we're getting some questions from online. So if you have any more, please be sure to drop them in. But in the room, do we have any questions? No? Yes, right here. What's your question? What do you have to do to become an astronaut? You want to take it?
Yes, and I had a slide for it. Too bad it's not up there. But okay, so if you want to become an astronaut, there was a call just a few years ago, and they selected, I think, 12 or so astronauts. And so one of the key things is that they're looking for STEM degrees. There are a lot of astronauts. They're looking for somebody that's, a background in geology, medicine, engineering. And so that's one degree or one thing. Another thing is that you want to have a wide variety of experiences, right? Not only educational, academics, high 4.0 GPA, all that, that's great. But really, when you look at the candidates and the astronauts that were selected this past time, they were so varied in their experiences, right? Jessica Watkins, for example, she went to Stanford, she played rugby. She's a doctor, and she had all this service to the community, right? So they're looking for people that are so experienced in all these areas that make them unique. So take another language, right? Take a minor in music. A lot of the astronauts are musicians too. They're artists, they're painters. They're looking for non-traditional thinkers, right? So a STEM degree, have a variety experience of professional academic careers, but also non-academic experiences. Be a part of challenges and competitions where you demonstrate your leadership, right? And so, for example, I know I saw robots in here. Is there a robotics team here? No, not yet. Okay, they're working on it, right? So if there's some way that you can demonstrate leadership, do it, right? If you get into clubs, that's another thing, right? And do, like when you're in the university, get into internships, work with mentors, work with professors, conduct research. So that way, by the time you apply to become an astronaut, you have a wonderful resume that you can lean on. And just because you don't get accepted the first time doesn't mean that you'll never get accepted. Jose Hernandez, for example, he applied 11 times. Jose Hernandez, first Mexican-American man in space, he applied 11 times before he was accepted to become a NASA astronaut. So determination is an important part of that as well. Great question. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. Any questions in the room? Yes. How much does it cost for SLS? Billions. A lot. It takes a lot of time. How many years have we been? Over a decade that we've been working towards the Artemis 1 mission. So we're on a high right now since we just launched that. But now we're getting into a cadence, like I mentioned, Artemis 2, 3, 4, to where we'll be launching every year. So it took a long time to get there, a lot of determination, but now we're going to get into production and continue. We improve, we reduce the cost, we reduce the time it takes between each launch going forward. Next question. Yes. Say it one more time. How did grad school benefit you?
So, I do basic research. And when I say basic research, it's trying to understand how certain physical mechanisms work. And typically the training for that is a lot of times is done in graduate school. So when you do your thesis, for example, you're basically supposedly doing unique work, and so it trains you to perform like that. And so it benefited me in the sense that that's the type of work that I do. I do fundamental research. So part of my job is to, and when I use the word fundamental research, so some of the testing I may do, it may not look like an airplane. So you might say, well, why are you looking at this flat plate? Or why are you looking at a cone? But these are things that might look like some geometry you may have on an airplane. And we're trying to study some basic physics on it to say, okay, if we understand it, we might be able to control it. And then we can do things in a real life airplane. So if you're flying at a hypersonic speed, a lot of times, well, I guess most of you have not seen the shuttle. But even the Orion, you would see on the surface that comes back in, there's what we call a heat shield, and that heat shield kind of prevents the vehicle from burning up, because the aluminum structure or the substructure would not be able to take that heat, and that heat shield prevents the structure from heating up. So the type of work that I actually do is I study how the flow goes from what we call a laminar state to a turbulent state. And this is the flow right over a surface. If the flow is laminar, it acts like a protective barrier, so it doesn't heat as much. If it's turbulent, there's a lot of mixing and it heats up. So what I do is to try to understand when the flow goes from a laminar to a turbulent state. And if we understand that, we might be able to control it, because the more heat shield you have on a vehicle, the heavier it becomes. It means that you could carry less payload. So if we can minimize that, we can potentially carry more payload or have a vehicle that's more energy efficient.
Awesome. So we're going to wrap for online. So thank you guys so much for joining in. We will actually be back. We're going to visit St. Croix on
Hello,
Friday.
I'm NASA astronaut Victor Glover, coming to you from the Johnson Space Center. I want to thank Dr. David Hall and the University of Virgin Islands faculty, staff, and students for inviting me to share a few words and for working with my NASA colleagues to plan and organize this week-long event, returning to the U.S. Virgin Islands for those in person and for those that we're connecting with virtually. Here at NASA, we continue to advance the research and technology to return humans to the moon. We are still pushing forward with plans to send the first woman and the next man to the moon under NASA's Artemis program. No human has set foot on the moon since Apollo 17 in 1972. So the possibility of landing on the moon is incredible. Artemis 1, the first integrated flight test of NASA's deep space exploration systems, which include the Orion spacecraft, the Space Launch System rocket, and the Exploration Ground Systems there at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, launched on November 16th of last year and traveled a total of 1.3 million miles to the moon and back. After a 25-day mission, the Orion capsule successfully splashed down on December 11th in the Pacific Ocean. It is now back at the Kennedy Space Center, where it's being tested and studied. It's getting ready for the next mission, Artemis 2, which will take our astronauts to the moon and back, and it will be here before we know it. Growing up, I was inspired by a space shuttle launch to dream of one day leaving the Earth. What a thought. And prior to joining NASA, I had the honor of serving as a U.S. naval officer and aviator, where I committed to a life of learning and servant leadership, and also fed my passion for aerospace, test and evaluation, and exploration. And now, as a NASA astronaut, my hopes are to inspire the next generation of leaders and explorers, to educate and advocate for human space exploration, and to elevate and highlight the teaching profession and its importance to a peaceful and civil society. As you learn more about NASA and all that we do, I challenge you to put yourself in our space shoes. Pretend that you're a NASA astronaut aboard the space station right now. Trust me, it helps. Before signing off, I want to give a shout out to the teachers, faculty, students, and staff, and all those nationally and internationally who are joining us from as far away as Hawaii, Tennessee, the Caribbean, South Africa, India, and Scotland. Thank you all for inspiring the future. And finally, to the student presenters from Cancreen Junior High School, All Saints School, Gift Hall, and Brentwood High School, thank you for sharing your vision and science with us. You brighten our future.